Calificas para ser legal. ¿Quieres saber? Solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.
Good morning. Welcome to our weekly English segment of Para Ser Legal. Today, three things we're going to be talking about. Trump's new deal with Mexico. What is it? How does it affect you and your family? 2, what is the process that's being followed if you or a loved one is coming to the border and requesting asylum? So what does that process look like? What's going to happen? What's step 1, 2, and 3? And 3, how did an attorney totally screw up George's case and why it's important to you? Those are the three things that we're going to talk on this program, Para Ser Legal, to be legal. My name is Andrés Mejer. I'm a speaker, published author, and immigration attorney. So let's jump right into it. Trump's deal with Mexico. Is there a deal? What is it? What are we really talking about? Well, first of all, there is no deal. It's an agreement to continue talking about a deal. That isn't to say that Trump didn't get anything out of it with his threat of tariffs. Very well, he may. It's really difficult to know because the agreement just says, hey, we're going to try to do the following and we're going to talk in 45 days and see how we did. That's pretty darn vague to be a deal. Now, what are we talking about? What is Trump trying to achieve? Like we explained in this segment in the past, Trump wants to be able to deny entry to all immigrants coming from the southern border. That is what he'd like to do. So there's something called safe third-party status. That is where the United States and another country enters into an agreement where that country says, hey, we're a safe country for asylum. So if you have an immigrant that passes through our borders and then comes to you and applies for asylum, not having applied with us, you can send it back and they can apply with us. So Mexico is southern border of the U.S. Anybody from Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, if they don't come by plane, they're coming through the southern border and they're passing through Mexico. If they pass through Mexico and the U.S.-Mexico has this agreement, safe third-party status, well, the U.S. can just say, oh, you went through Mexico? Go back to Mexico. Goodbye. They don't have to adjudicate the asylum petition. They don't have to hear it. They don't have to do anything. That's what Trump wants. Trump wants to be able to send you and your family back to Mexico because you passed through Mexico. Now, to date, Mexico has never agreed to do that, really for two fundamental reasons. One, they're not that safe. Let's be honest. Mexico has some of the same problems as Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, and other countries like Colombia to a lesser extent, sometimes even Peru. We don't hear much of that, and it's rare. But Mexico isn't the safest country in the world. There are problems there. So saying we're a safe third party is not a true statement. That's number one. Parts of the country are safer than others. But it depends. Look, if you're gay or homosexual, you're going to have a hard time in any Latin American culture. There are parts of Mexico which are better than others, but at the end of the day, you can be poorly treated and discriminated anywhere in Mexico because of your sexual orientation. Again, that's one example. 2, Mexico can't handle a huge influx of immigrants. Look, up until the past decade, Mexicans were coming to the United States to work. Why? If they had great opportunities in Mexico, they wouldn't be coming here. They didn't have those opportunities there, so they're coming here to earn more and to send back to their families. I mean, just think about this. If I'm, 25 years old, married with 2 kids, and I go to the U.S. knowing I can't travel back, knowing I don't see my kids grow up, I don't see my wife, I am essentially living alone in a foreign country where most often I don't speak the language, where I'm working and sending what I earn back to my family so that they can have a better life. That is not an easy decision to make. So Mexico is legitimately concerned that they can't handle the large number of immigrants that are coming right now. Now, what kind of numbers are we talking about? Well, Department of Homeland Security has accumulates apprehension numbers, and they post it on their website. So March, April, and May. I mean, we don't have June numbers yet. So March, and they have three different categories: unaccompanied minor, family units. That could be, a father with kids, mother with kids, or mother, father, and kids. Still one unit. And single, male or female, adults. So March, 8,968 unaccompanied minors. April went down to 8,900. May jumped up to 11,507. Not big numbers, but not insignificant either. Family units, March, 53,208. April went up to 58,724. And then May, 84,542. Those are big numbers now. And like we've said in prior segment of this show, the real crisis at the border isn't necessarily the fact that we now have over 100,000 immigrants coming every month. I'm not saying that's a small number. It's not. But the real crisis is it's the growth in the family units from 10,000 to 30,000 to 50,000 to now over 84,000 families coming at the border, and the majority of them saying, hey, I'm applying for asylum legally, the way they should, the way the law allows. But the problem is there isn't enough detention centers for families. The law says you can't hold children past a certain period of time for them to be processed. The parents, maybe they committed a crime, maybe they were criminals, maybe they have prior history. That's a different story. They're adults. The children did not choose to come. They had no choice. And accordingly, they did not commit a crime. So they cannot be jailed like criminals. That's the real problem. Singles, March 30,664, April 31,680, in May 36,838. My son popped in. Total, 132,000 immigrants came in May. April was 99,304, March 92,840. So the numbers are significant, 132,000. But the real crisis is there's inadequate detention. They're entitled to file for asylum. This is a humanitarian issue. This is a refugee issue. They're fleeing their countries in huge numbers. We need to solve it at the country level. What are the conditions in the country that are causing people to flee? How can that be solved so that they don't come? That's what the conversation should be about. Mexico, the US, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua coming together and saying, hey, how can we help you guys better take care of your citizens so they don't leave and go somewhere else? You, as a foreign country, you need citizenship, you need bodies, you need people. You don't want them to leave. So how can we help you improve their conditions so that they don't want to leave? That's what the conversation should be about, but it's not. Instead, it's how can we keep them out? Not solve where they're coming from, just how can we keep them out of here? I think that's wrong. That's just my opinion. Now, and why is this important to you and your family? Well, if at some point you have relatives that may want to come here and want to apply for asylum because situations are bad over there, if they pass through Mexico and there's a safe third party agreement, well, they won't be able to come in. The only way they're going to be able to come in is apply for a visa, and a tourist visa or something like that. And we know how incredibly difficult that is from Central America. If you're the age of 20 to 40, it's very difficult to get a tourist visa today. That's just a simple reality, because the overwhelming assumption is you're not coming here to visit, you're coming here to stay. And for that reason, they're denying those. So What happens if you come, you present yourself at the border, and you ask for asylum? Or you'd say, you know what, screw that. I'm going to take my chances. I'm going to come illegally. I'll just cross it, and if I get caught, then I'll ask for asylum. So the law allows you to do that. I would recommend you not do that. You don't want to be 10 years here and undocumented. If you have a good asylum case, if you really are legitimately afraid to go back to your country, well, apply it properly. So what happens? You go to the border, you present yourself, you said, hey, I am applying for asylum. I am afraid to go back to my country. So Customs Border Patrol officers are going to take you to a processing area for people that enter without permission. Now here, what do I mean by enter without permission? It means you didn't go to the U.S. Embassy or Consulate, you didn't request a visa, were interviewed, approved for a visa, and then entered by airport or port of entry. You did not have a visa prior to presenting yourself to come into the United States. That's what I mean by not by coming without permission. So you'll first be interviewed by an officer who's really you're gonna get fingerprinted, name, address, date of birth, where do you live, family, entries, and they're going to ask you a variety of things. But one of the most important questions is, are you afraid to go home? If you say no, well, they'll send you home. If you say yes, I'm afraid to go home, then the Customs Border Officer has to notify ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, who is going to find you detention space. Usually that happens in 72 hours. And you're going to be interviewed at some point by an asylum officer. This is called the credible fear interview. The officer is going to ask you a variety of questions. But at the end of the day, the focus is, are you afraid to go back to your country? And if yes, why are you afraid? And that why, the officer is looking at, well, could you potentially make an asylum case around that why? So I'm coming here because I can't find a good job. That's not a ground for asylum. I came here because I or my family was involved in politics. We lost, and now they came. The police appeared, or the military appeared at my house. They wanted to kill us. Okay, that's a different story. That's political asylum. It's a protected ground. You need to be a protected ground. If you recall, there's 3 basic questions for asylum. Why are you afraid to go back? Because something bad happened. I have a good reason to believe something bad will happen. Who are you afraid of? Government or a group the government can't control. And 3, why are you afraid? Why are they going to do something bad to you? And it needs to be a protected ground. Race, nationality, ethnicity, political opinion, or a particular social group. Those are the 5 protected grounds. Political opinion is one of them. Just lack of economic opportunity, that doesn't cut it. So, first officer says, hey, are you afraid? You say yes. Next, is it a trained asylum officer? Or should be a trained. There's a really question nowadays, how much training do they really get? But that's usually by phone. It's usually through the aid of an interpreter who's also by phone. So sometimes there are real language issues. Assuming we get past that, let's say you're a fluent English speaker, I don't know, you're in Belize, and Belize they speak English, as an example. So you speak Spanish, you speak English, so you can communicate why you're afraid. So at the credible fear interview, the officer will either find you credible and says, you know what, I do think you got a shot at proving your case. They're going to put you in removal proceedings. That's a nice way of saying the government's going to try to deport you, or you're going to have your day in court. You are going to get a complaint, and you are going to have to present yourself in front of a judge. You're going to then file a complaint, bring any proofs, and have a trial, and the judge will either approve your case or deny your case. Now, back to the credible fear interview. If you're approved, well, not approved. If the officer says, yes, you have enough, you have a shot to be able to prove your case. If he says you don't have a shot because you're afraid to go back because you can't get a job, and that's the only reason that you have, he's going to deny you, and then you got 2 choices. You can accept the officer's decision, in which case you get deported, or you can appeal it to a judge. If you appeal it to the judge, it's the same process as if the officer had found you credible. You're going to be issued a complaint. You're going to have to present yourself at court. You're going to prepare an asylum petition. You're going to have to give supporting documentation, give any affidavits. You're going to have to show up, have a trial. And at that trial, judge again, two options. One, denies you, says, I'm sorry, you do not meet the criteria, or I don't believe you, whatever it is, in which case you get an order of removal. That's an order of deportation. Or he could grant your status. If he does, you get status as a refugee, and a year later, you can apply for your green card. Now, if the judge denies you, again, you got two choices. You can accept what the judge says, and you get deported back to your country, or you can appeal. Appeal goes to the Board of Immigration Appeals. There's no trial here. You're explaining why the judge made a mistake in your case, either because of certain facts or because of misapplication of the law or in the way that he processed your case. But a judge made a mistake. That mistake was significant enough by which you did not have a fair trial or you did not get a fair resolution. And then the Board of Immigration Appeals, so we'll review your position, we'll review the transcript. The government has an opportunity to also write their brief and say, well, no, the judge made the right decision for the following reasons. They're going to evaluate it. Now, all the appeals I do, I always ask for oral argument. To be honest, they hardly ever give it to me. It's in Virginia. So not every case do I want to drive all the way out or fly out to Virginia because it's not really convenient. But I still request it because that's what's best for my client. It's my ability to stand in front of the judge or judges here and say, here's what happened and here's why it was wrong. Board of Immigration Appeals then either agrees with me or agrees with you and says, yes, the judge made a mistake, in which case they can either just overturn them and grant you status, or they can remand it back to the judge with instructions. Judge, you know what? Because you said no, he had no fear, you didn't go through and determine the other grounds for asylum. So go back and make that adjudication. And then the judge either agrees with the Board of Immigration Appeals or agrees with you and gets your status, or goes through the process and still denies you. Then you have to go back to the Board of Immigration Appeals. So Board of Immigration Appeals assume they deny. If they deny, then you can go to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. If they deny, you can go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, most cases don't go anywhere near that far. This is a process that takes years, and Trump wants to make sure you're detained while it happens. So it is, in my opinion, unfair and unusual, harsh to be in jail, even if it's immigration detention, for 2 or 3 years just because while you're fighting an order of removal. We fight for our clients after 6 months to be able to apply for a bond hearing and to be released on certain conditions. We don't always get it. Every case is different. It's case by case. But that's what we do, and that's what we recommend you should do also. So what happens when you request asylum? I just walked you through the process from when you're at the border to when you win or when you lose, and how the fight can keep on going, assuming there's a legitimate basis to do so. You don't want to file a frivolous asylum claim when it's expensive. Secondly, it just postpones the inevitable. So you really need a good ground, and you need a good attorney that can help you through the process. Why are attorneys important? Let me give you an example. So my name is Andrés Mejer. I'm a published author, speaker, and immigration attorney. If you have any questions at any time, you can give us a call at 888-888-0307. You can find us on most social media channels, but in principle, Facebook, and recently, we're giving new life to our YouTube page where this program is ultimately going to be. Now, for those of you that have just joined us, we first talked about what was Trump's deal with Mexico. I say deal in quotes because it's not much of a deal, number one. Number two, what's the process like when you're filing for asylum? If you present yourself at the border, or your family does. Three, I want to talk to you about, not all immigration attorneys are the same, and the harm a bad attorney can do for you. So I'm going to talk about what happened to George. Now, George is not his real name. George is very popular because every time I talk about male immigrant with an issue, it's George, and every female is Maria. So George, real situation, not his real name. He was caught coming into the border many, many years ago. Was told to present himself at court, never went, got an order of removal. So he was deported, but he lived here for many, many years, married Maria, a U.S. citizen. Maria wants to apply for George to get his legal status. And Maria goes to an attorney that was recommended to her. So this attorney sits down with the both of them, evaluates the options, says, okay, yes, Maria, you can apply for George, and we can help you get a green card. Now, family-based petition has two basic components. Here it's like 5, but generally, the first is you got to document the relationship, that the marriage is legitimate, and number 2 is your change of status, go from undocumented to lawful permanent resident. The challenge here is, since George has an order of removal, he was already deported. USCIS, which is the agency that normally gives someone a green card, does not have jurisdiction because of the order of deportation. So the process, as this attorney laid out, was document the relationship, file for a waiver, file to reopen his case before a judge to remove the order, then file for a waiver to waive the fact that he entered without permission and stayed, and then to leave the U.S., go to his country, go to the embassy, have an interview, and come back to the U.S. as a lawful permanent resident. There's nothing wrong with that process. That is a correct process. Here's the problem. The attorney didn't document the relationship, only attached a marriage certificate and a couple of photos. That's a problem. Can't do that. You need a lot of proof. That's mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, without waiting for the relationship to be adjudicated, she filed to reopen his case in front of the judge. The judge automatically denied it, saying, hey, it's speculative. You're asking me, you're telling me there's a new fact, a new law. Just because he got married doesn't mean the relationship is legitimate. USCIS has to first approve the relationship and find it bona fide, find it legitimate. Once it's legitimate, then the judge could reopen it. But even today, I wouldn't do that because now I'm stuck in front of a judge. Judge has no authority to grant me the green card either way. So I'm applying for something else, and it's a whole different process. And maybe I have a good claim for that. Maybe I don't. So So mistake number 2 was file a motion to reopen before USCIS had adjudicated the relationship. Mistake number 3 is she filed for the waiver again before USCIS adjudicated the relationship. It's through Form I-130. The waiver was denied. So the judge denied the motion. The USCIS denied the waiver, both for the same reasons. And now he gets his interview and he has to go in front of USCIS with these 2 denials. And he panicked. So he lost confidence as an attorney, rightfully so. He came to us. He hired us like at 5 o'clock the day before the interview. Now, there was almost nothing I could do between 5 o'clock and the next morning. So we went with him to the interview. Not surprisingly, ICE was there waiting for him, Immigration Customs Enforcement. We pleaded with the ICE officer to give him an opportunity to correct these deficiencies. And surprise, surprise, they did. Why? Because he has no criminal record. He's been here a long time and there was no real issue. And I don't know whether they believe me where I said the attorney made these significant mistakes, but she did. So we then we had the interview with USCIS. They said, listen, there's no documentation here. So they said, give us proof. They gave us 30 days to give documentation that the case was legitimate. They gave us 30 days. 25 days after they gave it to us, or 5 days before it was due, we mailed that packet to USCIS, and USCIS received it within 27 days or 3 days before the deadline. How do I know this? Because we sent it by Federal Express, and I have a signature with an officer from USCIS 3 days before it was due. The day it's due, immigration officer denies his relationship, denies his I-130 for failure to prosecute, because saying you never provide us any documentation. We received the denial. We reached out to the officer. We said, this is just flat out wrong. Here's the proof. Here's the copy. They said, okay, we're going to fix it. Time passes. They don't fix it. He has to go to, he goes to 2 ICE check-ins. And now we have the third one. And here we are almost a year later. And we're like, what's going on? Why is no one responding to that? So spoke directly with the USCIS supervisor. He apologized. I asked him to reach out to the ICE officer, and lo and behold, they did. That's really rare. So met with the ICE officer. ICE officer said, you know what? I spoke to the supervisor. He explained to me what's going on. I'm the one that has the file. The USCIS supervisor says, listen, I don't have the file, so I can't reopen it. And the ICE officer says, it's because I have the file. So I will give it to the USCIS supervisor. And she did. And that same day, USCIS reopened the case. We're going to have another interview. And since it's been a year, we're going to provide more proofs. George's case, the relationship part is going to be approved. But it doesn't stop there. Because he already filed his motion to reopen, I don't just want to say that the attorney made a mistake, because she did, but I don't want to rely on that, because ICE has already given us a year. I don't know how much time ICE is going to give us to do the rest of it. So I need to file a waiver specifically to overcome the to overcome the ground of inadmissibility, because he was already deported. So to waive that order. Once that happens, I can go and apply to waive his unlawful presence. See, today there are 2 things that make George inadmissible to the United States, meaning 2 things that prevent him from getting his green card. 1, he was ordered deported. 2, he entered without permission and he's been here over a year. So if he leaves, he can't come back for 10 years. So that's 2 different waivers, 2 different fees, 2 different processes, but the proofs are the same. When the first one gets approved, I then file for the second. Once the second one is approved, he then pays his visa fees. Well, actually, that's already happened. He then travels to his country, meets at the U.S. Embassy, has an interview, gets stamped on his passport, and he's a green card holder and can come back. All of this was prejudiced by George's attorney, who made not 1, not 2, but 3 fundamental mistakes. And believe me, I really mean fundamental. You never submit a petition without documenting proofs that support that your client actually is entitled to do it. You don't file the motion to reopen based on something that's speculative. You need adjudication by an agency saying his circumstances have changed. Before, he was undocumented and had no relief. Now he has relief because his wife applied for him and it's a legitimate relationship. All he's waiting for is to overcome these waivers. And you never file for a waiver without having first. You don't go to step 3 without doing step 1. She did step 2 and step 3 when step 1 wasn't completed. And immigration just doesn't work that way. Fundamental mistakes. So thank you for tuning in. My name is Andrés Mejer. I'm a speaker, published author, and immigration attorney. Today we talked about 3 subjects. 1, what's Trump's deal with Mexico and how does it affect you? 2, what's the process in which you're applying at the border for asylum? And 3, how an attorney really botched George's case and how George is going to get his green card despite his attorney's mistakes. I'm Andrés Mejer. Stay tuned until next week. 10 o'clock on Mondays. Thank you very much.
Calificas para ser legal, ¿quieres saber? Solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.